buddhi is the seat of decision making. It is the seat of discrimination, and it is the seat of will. And when we identify ourselves with buddhi, we are able to distance ourselves from the mind. When we exercise the will, we are able to gradually discipline the mind. When we think consciously higher thoughts, we identify ourselves with the buddhi. So, consciously thinking higher thoughts suppresses the gyrations of the mind. When we daydream or let the mind think of useless thoughts, the mind usually thinks of only useless thoughts, sense-bound thoughts, outward directed thoughts. Anything higher, we need to think ourselves consciously. If we get stimuli to make the mind think of outward bound thoughts, sense bound thoughts, but to get stimulus for higher thoughts, to lift the mind high, to make it our slave rather than being its slave, we need to struggle. We need to think consciously. When we think consciously, we develop our willpower. We grow strong in willpower, and these thoughts gradually begin to soak in our mind, and these thoughts begin to color our thoughts and actions. So the power of thoughts, that is something undeniable. In fact, there is a compilation of Swami Vivekananda's teachings in a small booklet called Thoughts of Power. The best way to think higher thoughts, I would think, is to study Swami Vivekananda's teachings and think on them. Think of these thoughts. I can. Swami Vivekananda says, think like a lion, not like a sheep. I can do it. I am a child of God. I am a spark of the divine fire. When we do this, gradually the sleeping lion in us begins to wake up. I am weak. I cannot do this. That is what the mind says. And when we say that, when we say I am weak, I cannot do this, I am bad, I am a sinner, and all that, that means we are identified with this mind and speak on its behalf. But anyone who is serious about the purpose of life, which is the manifestation of the divinity inherent in us, will need to struggle consciously in detaching themselves from the mind and asserting their independence. Independence as buddhi, as the Atman. Behind the buddhi is the divine spirit. And our Upanishads teaches we are that Tat Tvam Asi, that great Mahavakya of the Upanishads, which means we are that divinity. So the more we identify ourselves with that divinity, the better become our thoughts, the stronger becomes our will, and the more meaningful becomes our life.
The more meaningful becomes our life when we hear such thoughts, and these thoughts, when we repeat them to ourselves, something happens which changes the inner environment, which transforms us, and we start feeling good about ourselves. We feel there is a flow of joy in us, and which was probably hidden somewhere, and it suddenly comes up. And listening to Swamiji sharing all these thoughts, it's like listening to music which is empowering and which is connecting you definitely to your higher self, and also such a beautiful way of bringing out the distinction between daydreaming and the power of thoughts, or being one with powerful thoughts. Now, in order to be one with powerful thought, he mentioned that we should cultivate conscious thinking, and then brooding upon those thoughts. And he also mentioned about the small booklet of Vivekananda, which is Thoughts of Power. So when we talk about thoughts, we talk about conscious thinking. We also hear Swamiji quite often, we are told for spiritual seekers, the purity of mind is important. And while talking about purity of mind, food also becomes a way which would somewhere contribute in the kind of thoughts that you have. And we are also told to pay attention not only to what we eat, and that the thought person of the person who is touching our food may also have some kind of impact on us. Now, if we become so sensitive, it might be difficult to go and eat anywhere out in the restaurant, or to be part of some party where you don't know who is touching your food. So a marketing professional who by his profession probably feels that this is his every evening affair, that he has to go and sit with people and eat with them, dine out, etc. So do you think purity of mind is impractical for him, not possible?
The Chandogya Upanishad, one of the 10 principal Upanishads on which Sri Shankaracharya has commented, has this important passage: Ahara Shuddhau Sattva Shuddhihi. When the food is pure, the mind becomes pure. So the effect of food on the mind is something important. And there are different kinds of defects in food which we need to guard against. Good food, pure food, when it is consumed, the assimilated part of this food goes to build up our mind. And certainly there could be some defects in food, defects like foreign matter, and there could be defects in the nature of the food itself. Some food could excite our passion, and as Ashok said, there are the person who cooks our food, or who even serves our food, their mindset, their thought can affect the quality of our food. So food has a bearing on the purity of mind. Now, is purity of mind not possible at all for marketing professionals? That is the question here. Now, before we answer that, we need to understand the wider implication of this important mantra from the Chandogya Upanishad: Ahara Shuddhau Sattva Shuddhihi. When one's food is pure, the mind becomes pure. Sri Shankara comments on this passage and explains the term ahara. Ahara is usually understood to be food, but Sri Shankara says ahara is anything that we take in through the 5 sense organs: the ears, the skin, the eyes, the nose, and the tongue. So whatever we take in through these sense organs, that determines the quality of our mind. So when that becomes pure, the mind becomes pure. We cannot gain purity of mind if we are careless about what we take in through the 5 senses. And more important is what we gain through the mind. The mind is the chief of all the senses. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, Indriyanam Manaschasmi. Among sense organs, I am the mind. Among organs, I am the mind. Because the mind is the chief of the organs. That's because the mind is the internal organ. It can attach itself to any of these 5 sense organs and make perception possible. So what we take in through the mind, in the form of ideas, in the form of books that we read, the ideas we take in through the mind, that is more important. So more important is taking in ideas through the mind and inputs through the 5 senses. So we need to make some kind of a quality control, quality audit at the gate of the senses. What we take in through the senses is more important. So whether it is a marketing professional or a doctor or an engineer, whoever, if they are really serious about their spiritual growth, purity of mind pertains to spiritual growth, and purity of mind essentially means growing in God consciousness. Purity, external purity, purity of the body, we understand easily. But purity of the mind, what does it mean? Purity of mind means the spontaneity with which thoughts on God arise in us. The more we are able to think of God, the closer we are to God and the purer our mind is. So when we take care of what we let our senses absorb, and important, the mind absorbs, then we are on the right track to gaining purification of mind. But again, now back to the effect of food on our mind. Well, sometimes some people, based on their work, need to eat outside, but the apparent defects in the food or the person who brings the food can be nullified if we offer that food mentally to God who dwells in us and imagine that eating process to be some kind of an offering to the God within, then that simple act of eating becomes a spiritual practice. And when we eat this as some kind of a prasad, sacramental food offered to God, we are free from any evil that is attached to it. But that said, we need to seriously think if we need to eat outside regularly. If our work warrants that, then there is no alternative. But whether we eat at home or eat in restaurants outside, the best would be to offer mentally what we eat to God and think of that as prasad, as offered food. And prasad always goes to purify the mind. So that is the best solution for anyone. We also need to remember what we discussed now, that food is only one of the factors that influences purity of mind. We need to be more alert and careful about gathering inputs through the five senses and the mind.
Many of us, especially those who are students, feel that they lack the ability to concentrate their mind on something. Like if they want to read chemistry, the mind is taking them to some movie or something like that. So
yeah, there are two incidents in Swami Vivekananda's life to vouch for his power of concentration. The first is in Belur Mutt, the headquarters of our Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission in West Bengal, Belur Monastery. Swami Vivekananda was in his room, and he had a disciple, a household disciple by name Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. And his reminiscences of Swamiji, the conversations he had with Swami Vivekananda, are found in the book Talks with Swami Vivekananda, and they also form part of Swami Vivekananda's complete works. So the incident goes like this. A set of Encyclopedia Britannica had been just bought for the Mutt library. And when this disciple was sitting with Swami Vivekananda, he admired the shining volumes of those of that encyclopedia, and exclaimed to Swamiji, one lifetime is not enough to read these books. He didn't know that Swami Vivekananda had already studied 10 volumes and was studying the 11th volume. Swami Vivekananda said, "What do you mean? I've already finished these 10 volumes." The disciple was wonderstruck. How is that possible? Then Swamiji said, "You can ask me anything from these 10 volumes and I'll answer you." And the disciple tested him and found that for some questions, Swamiji's answer was not just giving the sense of the question, sense of the answer, but in certain places, Swamiji just reproduced what the encyclopedia volumes had in themselves. The disciple was really surprised, and he said, "That's something wonderful. How is that possible?" Then Swamiji said, "Everything is possible by the power of continence, brahmacharya." Of course, the disciple continued, "No, it can't be just brahmacharya. There should be something special about you." So this is one incident. Swamiji doesn't say anything further. Then he said, with this power of continence, it's possible to master anything in a short time. There is another incident. That was when Swamiji was leading a wandering life after Sri Ramakrishna's passing in 1886. He and his brother disciple, Swami Akhandananda, were in a place called Meerut, that's in northern India. So there, Swami Vivekananda wanted Akhandananda to get for him a set of Sir John Lubbock's works from the library nearby. And Swami Akhandananda borrowed these volumes for Swamiji, and the very next day, Swami Vivekananda asked these volumes to be returned. And the librarian thought Swamiji just was not interested. But Akhandananda told him that Swamiji had already finished reading all these volumes. And then the librarian didn't believe it. He said that's something not possible, not humanly possible. And when Swami Akhandananda reported this to Swamiji, Swamiji himself went to the librarian and told him that he could ask him any questions from those volumes. And after posing certain questions to Swamiji, the librarian was convinced that what Swamiji said was true. And then when he wondered how Swamiji found this possible, how Swamiji could do it, Swamiji said he didn't read any book word by word. He read sentence by sentence, and in some cases, paragraph by paragraph. And here again, this is something unique to Swamiji. He would always say the secret of education is concentration, and concentration brings out the hidden power, the knowledge that is hidden in us. Swamiji would say knowledge is already inherent in our soul, and what we do is to uncover the screens on that knowledge. So concentration is the main key to education. Swami Vivekananda says, if I had to do my education all over again, I won't collect facts at all. I would learn how to concentrate my mind, and with such a powerful instrument, a concentrated mind, I can gather facts at will. So this concentration of mind is an important subject. In India, whenever we conduct youth camps in our Ramakrishna Math or Ramakrishna Mission centers, this is one of the questions in the question answer session with the youths. Boys or girls, this will be one question. Swamiji, how to concentrate the mind? How to grow in concentration? So that's a very important and very topical question. Concentration of the mind doesn't happen by itself. We need to concentrate the mind on what we want to do at that particular time. So as we saw before, we need to distance ourselves from the mind. We need to educate the mind, fill the mind with noble thoughts, and cultivate a habit of prayer, be regular in our spiritual practice, and with repeated practice, the mind gradually learns. And the stronger our will, that means the stronger the buddhi, the more disciplined does the mind become, and the easier it becomes to concentrate the mind. What happens usually is the mind concentrates on things that it is comfortable with, which is always outside objects, senses. It's always eager to connect itself to any of these five sense organs: the ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue, and the nose. And these sense organs, in turn, are always eager to come in contact with their respective sense objects. So this outward directed journey, connecting to the senses and senses connecting to the objects, that is the line of least resistance for the mind. So this mind needs to be educated. When we study a book, for instance, as we saw just now, if we had trained our mind, we would be able to read the book for a longer duration without letting the mind flit from the object of our concentration. So concentration comes by repeated practice, by filling the mind with noble thoughts, by subjecting it to discipline. A simple solution exists to achieve concentration of mind and to achieve strength of mind. On a typical holiday, when we examine, we just spend our time in a random way, because that is the day we are supposed to take it easy, we are supposed to relax, unwind ourselves. But then if we think about it, as we saw a little earlier, when we let the mind drift from one thing to another, when we do just daydreaming, we end up doing nothing. We don't read newspaper, we don't take shower, we don't go for a bath, we don't go for a prayer. At a particular time, when we sit on a chair and then examine all these options, nothing happens. But if I subject myself to a daily routine, do this at 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock do this, 9 o'clock do this. If I have a fixed time for my fixed daily activities, the mind doesn't get the luxury of daydreaming, of flitting from one thing to another. When we let the mind flit from one thing to another, toward nothing in particular, we need to remember that we are dissipating precious mental energy. And this dissipation will not be conducive to concentration of mind. We need to remember the law of conservation of energy. Energy can neither be created nor can it be destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form to another. So the energy we have, mental energy, needs to be conserved. And when that energy is conserved by self-restraint, by discipline, the mind grows in power. The common example that is given is sunlight by itself doesn't do anything to a sheet of paper, but you concentrate those rays with the help of a magnifying glass on that paper, and that spot is enough to burn the paper. Similarly, a dispersed mind, a diffused mind, a daydreaming mind doesn't help us grow in power, grow in strength, but a concentrated mind. Of course, that concentration comes by practice. That concentrated mind becomes a powerful tool. That is why Swami Vivekananda said, if I had to do my education all over again, I won't collect facts. I will learn how to concentrate the mind. And with a concentrated mind, with that powerful instrument, I can collect facts at will. Whatever facts I want, that mind will collect those facts at will. Just as we saw just now, Swamiji wanted to study some books, encyclopedia, or some other works from the library. When he chose to study that, his mind did that and nothing else. That is because of his power of concentration. So the more we address the mind, the more we train the mind, the more the mind starts learning. And we need to be steadfast in this. But a little resistance from the mind toward this discipline is enough for most people to give up the struggle. When we try to grow in concentration, when we try to discipline the mind always resists it. But come what may, we need to be persistent, knowing that we are superior to the mind. We are the divine. We are children of God. We are sparks of the divine fire. And this mental resistance doesn't do anything to me. If the mind wants to do what it believes to be right, I will do what I believe to be right. When I persist in doing things, whether the mind wants it or not, I gradually grow in strength, and the mind gradually gets weakened. It begins to more and more listen to what we want it to do for a change. Because most of the time we follow the mind, we follow the dictates of the mind, we dance to the tunes of the mind, little knowing that we are different from the mind. When we follow the tunes of the mind, we are one with the mind. The mind is happy this moment, I am happy. The mind is confused the next moment, I am confused. The mind is restless, I say I am restless. It's anxious, I am also anxious. All this is because I am totally identified with the mind. So a sincere seeker, a sincere student of Swami Vivekananda would try to take the whole responsibility on his shoulders and try to think of disciplining the mind. And this becomes easy with regularity in prayer. We can pray to God for strength of mind. We can pray to God to be persistent in our efforts despite mental resistance. And Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda's Guru, assures us this: what we need is sincerity and earnestness. Anyone who is sincere and earnest will certainly realize the goal of life.